Alex. I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Alex.
My sobriety date is 1/2/15. My home group is the Saturday morning men's big book group at the Park in Antioch. We're going to start this part of the McHenry Soberfest, Step 8 and 9 workshop with a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer, please.
God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you. So we're going to start out by having Sarah Lynn do the introduction. She's in the speaker chair.
She's amazing.
Speaker chair.
Get a seat. Hi, I'm Sarah Lynn. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Sarah Lynn.
My sobriety date is July 24th, 2019. Northwest Oaks is my home group, Thursdays at 8 p.m. In Palatine, Illinois. So when I took the position of speaker chair, I didn't realize how much there was to do. So halfway through the year, I was asked, okay, so, and the speakers are okay with doing the 8th and 9th step workshop. And I said, the what? And they were gracious enough to say, you know, absolutely, no problem. And then even this week, I was asked, are you ready to introduce the speakers? And I said, ready to do what? And I said, is there a script? I was told no. So I want to absolutely thank our two speakers, as well as our other two speakers, Harold and Gemma. They have been so kind and so accommodating and wise, and we just could not ask for better speakers for this year. John and Amy, John our Friday night speaker, and Amy our Sunday morning speaker, are going to be talking a little bit on the 8th and 9th step, usually, I guess we do this as we call someone up to the panel one at a time, but these two know each other, and as Amy has described them, they're both smart asses. So I thought, you know, we figured it would be great to just hear you guys have a conversation. So we are going to hear our speakers talk a little bit on steps 8 and 9, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A. So, you know, think of your questions. And take it away, Amy and John.
Thanks, Sherilyn. Just don't suck.
Good afternoon. Amy Spain Duncan. I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Amy.
Sound guys, am I okay? Everybody? Okay, because they were so kind. They moved mics. They did all this stuff for us. Thanks, John. So, Amy Spain Duncan, alcoholic. Sobriety date is March 6th of 2010. I have a home group. I have a sponsor. And I've been through the steps, and I take women through the steps, you know, so that qualifies me, I guess, to do this thing with John. I don't like to go first because I like, you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and I'm still a baby in this deal, so I like to follow the people in front of me. So I wanted John to go so that I could go, I agree with John. That was my whole thing, and he kind of said, no, you're going to go first, so that's what we're going to do. I'm excited to hear Gemma tonight. I love that. I love what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I want to talk a little bit about the 9th step. And if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous or you're old in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, we read those promises over and over again. It's kind of the hook. It's the bait, right? So sometimes when you're new, and if you are listening at all, you hear that part. You know, I'm always interested in what are you going to give me? And so when I got here and they were reading promises, I was like, okay, so what do I get out of the deal? And they would read these beautiful promises, and I would think, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'd like that. And then, but they're after the 9th step, right? So there's so many promises in our book and so many things that line. But we get to this 9th step, and for me, when I got sober, I was badly mangled. You know, I'd beaten into a state of reasonableness. That's the condition in which I arrived. And I was sorry. Man, I was sorry. I was sorry for all the pain I'd caused. I was sorry about those children that I'd walked away from. I was sorry. But sorry is not an amends. Sorry is just sorry. And my sorry had a lot of self-pity wrapped up in it, right? Because I feel so bad for me about what I did to them. And so wanting to rush out, immediately and tell them I'm in treatment and it'll all get better, right? Those sweet promises when we want to do something. And my sponsor knew me, and she saw that comment. She didn't know me. Our friend Mike Donnelly says, I do know you. Recently, life has been awful when you get here. Like, I know, I can bet the past year has been terrible. That's how we arrive in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she knew that I carried a lot of mother's guilt, and I, confessed to her that I had these kids and these situations, and that just that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, that place of hopelessness in which I sank to. And she said, do not start calling those. We make amends on step 9. And you're not going to be sorry or make any promises or any of those things until step 9. And that kept me from trying to do step 1, 2, 3, 9, right? Because that's what I want to do. Because I want forgiveness. I need you to absolve me. It's because it's all about me. Because I haven't worked steps 1 through 9. So I'm still self-centered, self-seeking, inconsiderate, and driven, by all that fear that Harold was talking about this morning. Right? So I'm not positioned to make a 9-step amends because I'm still driven by self. And I need to make amends so I'll feel better. Right? And that's backwards. That's not what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. So through the process of the steps, and especially 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, now I'm kind of half-cocked because I'm new and I don't know really what I'm doing. And, I took a lot of hits to the head. So things aren't well. But we're gonna make a run at it. We're gonna make a run at this, and I'm gonna approach this step 9, and I know it's necessary. And on the other side of that is that carrot you've been dangling, right? Those promises, and so I'm eager to do it. I sponsor a lot of women who kind of balk and stop. Their program stops at 9. They just stop at 9. We do a real good 4-5 inventory. We get down with 6 and 7. We make a list. I review it, very important. And then they're going to meetings and they're doing. And I say, hey, how you doing on your amends list? No, they put it on a dresser or in the back of a notebook, never to be looked at again. And I'm like, this is an action step actually. We got into action. This isn't a decision or a prayer, or this is an action step. And the people I see that kind of halt and different reasons for it. So when we talk about 9, I think there's a humility piece that has to get. First, I have to be spiritually prepared for 9 through the previous steps. I have to be spiritually right and prepared so that I understand the assignment, what I'm doing. And when I'm making amends, I'll tell you the difference. In the beginning, I need to make amends because I need you to forgive me so I'll feel better. Right. Through the spiritual work and the shifting and the changes that occur through steps, when I get to 9, I need to make amends so you feel better. So this wasn't your fault, and you didn't deserve this, and you didn't have this coming, man, and I was wrong. So I have a different motive for my step 9. It's not to make me feel better. It's so that those people I harm know that wasn't personal, man. And I didn't mean to do that to you. I want to make it right with them. I want to make it right with my kids. So I've got a different, Don Majors calls it an angle of approach, right? So my angle of approach has shifted. When I went to make amends, I got done with the big ones, mom, dad, ex-husband, kids, those kind of things. And I went back and my sponsor said, how'd it go? We're kind of doing the debriefing period. And I said, it was great. They just said, stay sober. She goes, oh yeah. She goes, those are the hard ones. So what do you mean? What do you mean that's the hard one? She said, did they say how long?
Good question.
They did not. They didn't say how long.
Right.
They didn't say how long. And she said, so you've tried to stay sober all your life and in different periods and times and everything, and nothing ever worked, and you found this thing that works, so I guess you have to, the other thing they would say is keep doing what you're doing. And she had me write down all the things I'm doing. I was like, John was talking about that they used to, I used to do this and I used to do that, and Harold mentioned it this morning about continuing to do the things to stay sober. And I always say I do the same things today to stay sober that I did to get sober, because those kids didn't say, do it for 2 years, Mom. Do it for 5 years, or do it for 8 years. They didn't say how long. And the spiritual shift that occurred in me through the process of the steps, I hope that when I'm taking my last breath, that I am still in an active amends process with the people I've hurt. Because that was the accord, right? We made a deal. I came to you and I said, how can I make this right? And you said, stay sober, and you didn't say how long. So this is now my assignment. This is now the job I'm going to do, because I want to make those amends sincerely and completely. And we talked in our literature, it says that when it's talking about home, it says the man who says that sobriety is enough, that's not it, man. I've got relationships to repair. So I'm gone. I'm in treatment. I'm not in treatment. I wasn't fancy. I'm in a homeless shelter. It sounds better when I call it treatment. Doesn't that sound impressive? Are you impressed?
It's fancy.
It's fancy. I'm not in. I'm in a homeless shelter. But they don't know. I'm just gone, right? I'm there and I'm doing whatever Mom's doing, or Amy's. At least she's indoors and somewhere safe. For a while. And I'm doing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and I'm with you. I'm with you and I'm with God. And 9's where I show back up with them, right? I'm coming back in now that I'm coming back to them. I've done all this with you, and I've been kind of away from them because I'm healing. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm going to meetings. I'm working with a sponsor. I'm developing a relationship with this God of my understanding. But at step 9, I'm about to reintroduce myself to them. And so I have to be spiritually prepared for that. And it's this kind of critical moment, because I'm coming back to them as this new creation. And I want to set things right with them and then move this path forward. So it's a powerful and important step. Don't put it on your dresser. The amends process. We got a guy at home that says, when you're done making your amends, come see me. Right? Because we have this thing to do. But that, I'll let John go. There. Where are we at? It was a few minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
I thought I was going to kick back for 20 minutes. I do have some notes. I have really bad ADD, and I'll start talking about every step but the 8 steps. So I like to jot down a couple themes I want to talk about. And I was that guy that Amy just read about that. Man, I'm sober, that's enough, and I've had to make a lot of amends for my behavior in sobriety.
Yeah.
And even though when we go to make amends, we never use, hey, we were drinking or drugging as an excuse, you always feel a little bit better about it, right? Like, at least I was under the influence, and I didn't have that luxury with a lot of my amends. Alcoholics Anonymous is... If you're new here, I want you to hear one thing this weekend, and that is the 9th step is AA's payday. The 9th step is AA's payday, right? This is where the magic happens for so many of us, and that I avoided for so long. I think more people go back to drinking from not doing amends than they do from not doing an inventory. It doesn't happen the first day they decide not to do an amends, but at least what happened to me. And I've often thought about, when I shared my story last night, kind of what got me drifting off course in sobriety. And I've shared some of the theories last night, and I don't know that I'll ever know the answer, and why isn't really that important. But I do know is that for a while, not making amends made me feel like a fraud. And if I feel like a fraud in AA, I'm in big trouble. And if I get separated from the herd for any reason, whether it's dishonesty or selfishness, but feeling like a fraud is a big one. And I too, like Amy, had what I thought were the easy ones. When I first went and wanted to visit my mother. You know, she was a typical 1980s Al-Anon mom. She wasn't in Al-Anon, but she qualified, and she just did not want to hear anything. Like, she told me, I have enough details already. Thank you. Right? Like I don't need, you know, like in her world, if you did not say it or talk about it, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember as a kid, like, you know, my parents would have these knockdown, drag-out fights. You know, the car would be upside down on the front lawn, the kitchen's burnt down, and, you know, my brother's got a black eye, and the next morning my mom's like, Cheerios or Captain Crunch, what do you want, you know? And I'm like spending the night hiding underneath my mattress, and I'm like, Captain Crunch, like, where is everybody? Like, what happened to the kitchen, you know? And anyways, that's her story. She just didn't want to hear it, and I was kind of cool with that. But I do remember her saying, I thought about it when you were talking. She said, because I had about a year and a half maybe when I approached her, and she had thought that I had completed this recovery deal.
Yeah.
I mean, because I spent 16 months in my 6-month treatment program, and they gave me that certificate, and she was there, and congrats, you're done. And I mean, she knew I couldn't drink, you know, that wasn't, but she just thought I was kind of done with that deal, and she was happy about it. You know, I'm glad that Sarah Lynn described this as a conversation. You know, our job here is just to share our experience. I don't have a magic understanding of what Bill really meant on page 78 when he was talking about amends. You know, we just share in here, and I'm really grateful for that. As he says, you know, our job is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service and those about us, and this is a big part of that for me. And I avoided amends like the plague. I am, to this day, I avoid tough conversations. I am an emotional coward. I'm not ashamed, like I just am. Like, but when I do this deal and plug into this deal and surrender, God gives me just enough courage to get over that, you know. But I am, like, I'm an emotional coward, and that's all right. I'm good with that, you know. There was a bunch of amends that I couldn't make, so in my early recovery, I made the early ones. I made the financial ones with the banks and the credit card companies and the motor vehicle administration and stuff like that. You know, the ones that were keeping me from getting what I wanted.
Yeah.
You know, those seemed like strategically, strategically, you know, that's pretty smart to make the amends that are, because to me that was kind of the goal of, you know, getting what you want. And I shared with you a little bit last night about my relationship with my father, and it was a disaster, and it was a disaster in recovery, and I refused to make those, you know, and so I just went to the other ones, you know. And I remember the only thing that ever catapulted me into the amends was just fear and humiliation, you know. I remember this one amends. I had moved out of this place that my wife and I were living, and didn't pay the last month's rent, and you know, because you need that for the next month's security deposit, new place, if you live like I used to live, and I needed to make this amends. I felt really bad about it. I remember today it was $775, and I kept, you know, just pushing it off. You know, there was many times that I had that extra money and I didn't make it, and then you know, God's got a sense of humor. And so one day my wife was like, let's go try this new church. I'm like, all right. And we're sitting in this church, and down at the end of the aisle is this dude. And, you know, I was like, oh my God, you know, and the church was over, and I was like, we got to go. And we bolted out the other thing, and like 2 weeks later, we're at Home Depot, and we've got the 2-year-old in the cart, you know, and I'm walking down the aisle, and there he is at the end of the aisle. And I said, hey, I think we need to go Lowe's. Lowe's has better prices. And the funny thing is, this is true. I went and saw him finally after that, you know, and because I kept, you know, I don't listen well. You know, and sponsors would tell me, you know, you don't have to have all the money at the same time. Just show up. And I'm going to go off. I think amends have a good amends have 3 consistent qualities. One is accountability or ownership, if you will, of the wrong.
Yeah.
This guy's name was Scott. Hey, Scott, I did you wrong. I ran out with the last month's rent. Boom, right? Not, well, I had this situation and it was Tuesday and I got shorted on my pay. It was just ownership. This is what I did wrong. Excluding the word sorry, as you talked about. I told I'm not allowed to use that word. So that's the first part. And the second part is willingness to set it straight. And that's pretty easy in that little scenario. And the third thing is the willingness to hear their side. And that came in big with a couple people. And in particular, like I'll tell you, my mother, right? She did not want to talk about, she didn't care about, like my big guilt was about the money. I told you about all the money I stole from them. I mean, it was a lot of money. When it was finally got added up, it was a year's worth of mortgage payments I stole from them. It's a lot of money, and no matter what era you live in, that's a lot of money. And as a parent today, I can't imagine, and I don't care about the money. Like if parents don't care about the money, and she didn't care about the money, but that's what I felt guilty about. But when I gave her the opportunity to talk, she was able to dump some stuff that she would have never had the opportunity, right? She talked about the sleepless nights, the 3 a.m., the 4 a.m., when was the phone going to ring with the police or the hospital, And yet I want to get rid of what I want to get rid of. And it's not about, yes, I get a little piece of my soul back, but it's about peace, right? It's about making peace with the other person. And I think that's really the goal. I'm hoping to get some forgiveness, and I'm hoping to give some forgiveness, but that's kind of a byproduct. So I showed up at this cat's house with this money, and I said, Scott, I feel terrible. I rolled out of there without giving you. And this guy was really good to me. I mean, we had never paid rent on time, and I mean, we didn't operate on the typical Roman Christian calendar, right? Like ours varied a little bit, depending on how many paydays there were in a month or whatever. And anyways, and he was really cool. He's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I kept your security deposit." And I didn't even remember, like I had left him a security deposit, And so all this time, I'm like tortured by this amends. I'm running out of church. I'm running out of Home Depot, I mean, the only thing he didn't say is like, hey, I tried to say hello to you. I mean, thank God he didn't do that, but and so I'm going to tell you a couple of men's stories, and I'm going to shut up. I told you I went to this recovery high school, and I really, I've only talked about this twice being recorded because I don't know how to talk about it. The last thing I want is to talk about this taking any credit whatsoever, and so I'm just putting an asterisk out there. I have nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you. So I'm a bunch of years sober, and I'm going through the steps with my sponsor, Scott. Actually, I'd already been through the steps with my sponsor, Scott, and he said, hey, he was going through the steps with somebody different, our friend Howard P. And I said, that's a really good idea. I'm tired of listening to you. I'm going to find somebody else to go through the steps with, and just for a new perspective, And I'd been spending some time with Harold, and I said, let's go through the steps, and we started going through the steps, and I had this amends that I had to make to the United States Postal Service. Somebody laugh back there? I owned this, I had this job for about 15 years, and as a part of this, I had a little side business, and the short version is I scammed them out of some money. Some people might call it fraud.
That's federal, by the way.
And it was a lot of money, and this guy trusted me so much. So we had this printing company that I worked for and worked with, and I had this little business. We would do the mailing aspect, where we would address it and sort it and take it to the bulk mail entry unit for the post office. You show up with 100,000 pieces of mail. And this may surprise you, they weren't the most efficient organization in the world. and you would bring them a form that said, hey, I have 100,000 pieces of mail, and here's how they're sorted. And the guy trusted me so much, like he didn't even make me put it on the scale to verify how many pieces. And a couple times, I was a little short or for whatever, and the customer's already paid me for the postage, and so I may have perhaps maybe putting down the wrong number of how many pieces of mail there were, and so if you're dropping off 100,000 pieces of mail and you say, well, this maybe 90,000, rough, I'm not sure, whatever, I'm scamming the government, and I couldn't make this amends formally to them because they would have. There's a lot of ramifications. The company I worked for would have been unable to ever do business with them again. They have 50 employees. A lot of people would have lost their jobs. I certainly would have lost my job, and certainly I don't want to go to prison, right? I don't know how to fight, and federal, right? Thank you. I hope the statute of limitations is passed. And anyways, I had this amends, and when I went through with Scott, I may have been a little vague about the severity of it. I ripped them off for a couple bucks or something. But when Harold and I started going through the steps, it was on me like like a spider monkey, as they say. And I didn't know what to do, but I was willing to do whatever it took. And Harold said, why don't you just start setting some money aside, and maybe you can start a little. Trust sounds like a big word, but I didn't know what the amount was, but I owed them somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. It was just a rough jailhouse napkin math, and that recovery high school that I went to had gotten closed down many years before, like 15, 20 years ago, and this is about 8 years ago we started this process, and he said just start putting some money aside, and just. Be willing, right? That is our job, is to be willing. And maybe you'll donate it to a charity, or maybe you'll start a little 501c3, who knows? And I said, okay, and started doing that. And this guy shows up in my office, and he says, hey, we are, it's a guy I know from recovery. He says, I know you've been sober a long time. I don't know much about your story, but we're actually trying to start a recovery high school in Washington, D.C. Do you want to join us? And because the closest one was Philadelphia, and I'm like, yeah. Have you ever heard my story? And he's like, no. And I was like, I went to a recovery high school. And he's like, really? And so I was eager to help. And the light kind of came on. Like, okay, this is a place where I'd like to put this money. The short version is they disbanded. I couldn't get that invested. It was about an hour away from where I lived, but I felt really called to this mission. And so I had been dragging this woman down there that my wife sponsors that was an educator to get involved as well. And one day we were driving to this group to do a talk, and I said, Sarah, we have to do this, right? This is like 3 months after they had disbanded. And she's like, oh, I knew you were going to say that, And I was like, we just got to do it, And she's like, how are we going to do this? I said, I got no idea, She said, where are we going to get the money? I said, I got no idea. She said, where are we going to get a building from? I said, I got no idea. God's going to have to figure all this out. And, our job is just to be willing. And she's like, I guess she thought she had to go along because my wife sponsored her. And she said, okay, the opioid epidemic was really crazy where we lived. And, so we had this community support, and we started doing this deal, and we got some people who said, hey, we told them about what we want to do, and got them involved, and started raising, some money, and after a while, it was like we had 30 people that were like really involved in this mission. And I was like, oh my God, like this, and it all started out of just doing a little, starting a little amends and being a little willing. And we started this 501c3, and we started raising much money. Anyway, so we had got this place. We raised a couple $100,000 pretty quick, and we had rented this little old farmhouse building. And one of the guys that was helping us had a connection with this philanthropist with big bucks. Nice. And he showed up, And I'm a salesman by nature, and we started walking him and his wife around, telling them our grand plans. It's a beautiful 8-acre little estate in Old Frederick, and I can tell this guy this sale is not happening. You know, he's like looking at his watch, but his wife was kind of into it, and so I'm like keying on her, and we sat down at the end. And he's like, "This is a bad idea," and I said, "What are you talking about? This is a bad idea." And he said, "Well, this property you have, this building you have is 200 years old. It's going to eat up any money you have." He was a builder. He's going to eat up all your money. This is a terrible idea. He's like, "Your mission is good, but this idea is terrible. I'm not giving you any money." I'm like, "Thank you." And good thing we just signed a lease. And the next day he calls me on the 4th of July. This guy is like, he's got like $100 million. This guy's got better things to do. My point is he's got better things to do than call me on the 4th of July. And he says, I was talking to my wife last night, and I was like, yes. And he said, I did some research on recovery high schools around the nation and stuff, and I'm really interested in helping you guys. I'm like, all right, here we go. And he said, do you think you can get out of that lease you just signed? I said, yeah, I think I can get out of it. And he said, I've got a couple properties, and in downtown Frederick, and we talked for like an hour and a half, and he went through the three of them, and I knew the one we wanted. It's right in the middle of, bus station, train station, right by the AA coffee shop, right down the street from the AA club. I was like, this is the spot, And I looked it up on Zillow, what he had bought it for, and he had bought the YMCA building next door for like $20 million. And then he had bought this little building for $2 million, just because he didn't want the riffraff to be moving in next to this other thing. Seriously, he didn't want like a head shop being moved in next to this thing that he was doing. And he said, well, think about it. And I said, no, I don't need to think about it. We want that spot. And he says, all right, I'll call you tomorrow. And so he calls me on July 5th, which is my AA birthday. And he says, I said, I'm doing the math. This place is $2 million. Our rent's gonna be the same. It's gonna be about $10,000. And he says, well, I'm gonna give it to you. And he says, if you can keep that school running for 5 years, you can have it. And God just rearranged the entire universe to make it happen. I had nothing to do with that, and we took about 2 years getting formed, and right the COVID hit, and we're like opening a recovery high school. We got licensed by the state of Maryland in COVID to open a high school. So the funny thing is, at that school right now, there's a plaque on the wall that has my name on it that I'm allowed to distribute high schools, but in the name of the state of Maryland. I'm allowed to distribute diplomas in the name of the state of Maryland. If they only knew who I was. It's like, y'all know you threw me out, right? And we had 3 years ago, three and a half years ago, we had our first graduate, and she's up at the University of Vermont as a junior in a sober dorm room, getting ready to graduate. And it's all from being a little willing. And I want to talk to you about one more thing. What time did we start? Oh, we got plenty of time. So this is what I really came to talk to you about. Is so the first 9 years, I would not make amends with my old man. I would not. Every time a sponsor would bring it up, it was time for a new sponsor. I had heard this term, living amends, around the room. Tell me how you really feel, Amy. And
Sorry.
And I think there's a context where that is appropriate.
Yes, definitely.
Like my mom said, just stay sober and stay out of my wallet. That's a living amends.
Yeah.
But I had told myself the lie. Well, I'm doing a living amends. I'm not stealing from them anymore. I mow their lawn for God's sake.
That's a lie.
And every now and again I would take him to the hospital when he would pass out on the floor, and so we're even. And the reality is, the book talks about being able to go to somebody regardless of any harms they'd done you.
Yeah.
And I could not Of course, I could have, but I could not do that. I was still keeping score. And I had lost the resentment had gone, right? Like, I think in between, I think there's some steps, right? There's like, at least for me, like there was first the acceptance, and then there was some forgiveness, and then it just becomes mercy. And I just thought that the acceptance was forgiveness. Because people would say things to me that made a lot of sense. They'd be like, "Can't you see that your old man did the best that he could? Don't you? Do you think he did a better job than his old man did? Stuff like that." And I mean, I'm not an idiot. I can say, okay, yeah, he was under the lash of alcoholism. It wasn't about me, and okay, I get it, and but I couldn't make the amends, and he got really sick, and with 9 or 10, right before my 10th anniversary, he died, and I never made the amends, and some time goes by, and he died 2 weeks before my son was born, and I just let it be, and then I went back through the steps with Scott, like I was talking to you about last night, and he said, "All right, we got to write a letter because that's what the book says." And I said, the people that can't be seen, we write them a letter, and I wrote him a letter, and I meant what was in the letter, but I didn't. It didn't give me peace. I wasn't at dis-ease with, but there was just more work to do, and that's what I talked about earlier. Like, the goal is peace. It's not about checking this box, Sometimes amends take many efforts, Sometimes the person's not ready. Sometimes, we're not ready, for whatever reason, And so I wrote the letter, and I said, I've really done the best I can. I've done this letter. We burned it. Great. And but I still felt kind of fraudulent about it. I would hear these incredible stories, and then I'm down at Usual Suspects, this men's retreat, and Howard Polens talked about him and his old man. And me and Tommy T were sitting next to each other, crying like schoolgirls. And Howard said, what he had to do was make a list of all the things that his old man had given him. And it started off with some little stuff, and it later grew into big stuff. And so I thought about it, that's a really good idea for other people to do. And so, I'm not rushing into doing that, but then stupid Tommy did it and then reported back to me, what an incredible experience it was for him. And I was like, oh my God, just keep that stuff to yourself. I'm like, I'm sober a long time. I don't need to hear that. And so I really, I really was blocked, and so he had an Irish twin, which means you're, less than a year apart. I think they were like, anyways. And they were like spitting images of each other. They were both drunks, and I got him, my Uncle Jim, at a sober moment, and I said, hey, can I have lunch with you? And I hadn't seen him since my old man's funeral, so this is like, a bunch of years later, 15, whatever, a lot of years later, 20-something years later. And he's like, are you dying? I said, no, I just like to talk to you. He said, what do you want to talk about? And I said, I'd like to talk about my father. And he said, yeah, and he showed up with his photo album with this guy who was pre-alcoholism, who had these smiling faces. And he said, and I'd never seen that face on my father. And he said, do you know what we called your dad when he was a kid? And I said, no, I have no idea. He said, yeah, our father nicknamed him Honey because he was so sweet. And I said, are we talking about the same dude? And I mean, because we had never shared any affection. Alcoholism had got him. And, the book says, my favorite page in the book, I think it's 124, it says, cling to the thought that the dark past is the greatest possession you have. And so I made I'm jumping forward a little bit. I made my list, and the list started off with, he gave me the love of Maryland crabs. That's a good thing, I just had to start, and then it was like,
Made that up.
yeah. Well, he used to bring home crabs all the time.
Okay.
And then I said, well, he gave me the love of the Redskins, and which some of you might think is a curse, but there was an era in the '80s where we went to 4 Super Bowls, and that just created just the smallest little bit of space. And then I was like, because I that recovery high school, there was no buses or anything. And then I was like, oh, this dude drove me every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, 45 minutes to drop me off at this recovery high school. When I got home from my very first A meeting that I told you about at the Rockville Metro Club, on my bed was his big book that he didn't need. Certainly needed it, but that was his take. Create a little more space, and so for a long time I just kept talking about it just like I'm talking about it now, and it really got to be full circle about 3 weeks ago. Scott and I were leading a retreat in Oklahoma City for Cliff, and I just share that story. One of the Q&As in the retreat was, "What's your biggest regret?" That's my biggest regret, right? And so this guy called me a month or two later and said, "Hey, will you sponsor me? Take me through the steps?" And I said, "All right." That's, he'd been sober a long time, and I said, "All right, let's do it." And but when I take guys through the steps who have been through before, I say, "Listen, only if you're willing to go through this process with a clean slate, like with this idea that you know nothing." And he said, "Yeah, I'm willing to try that." And we got to the 4th step, and I'm like, "Who's on your list?" And he goes through his list, and his dad's on his list. Big shocker. And he said, "But I'm really not resentful." And I said, "All right." And I said, "When was the last time you talked to him?" He said, "It's been 7 years." Okay. And I said, "Well, let's just pray for him. Maybe you are a little bit. Let's pray about it." And so he's doing the prayer work that we do in the 4th step. And then we got to make an amends, and the amends part. And he had talked to him one time in 10 years. And that one time was about 5 or 7 years ago. And they had a fight at a Denny's, which is where all good fights happen. And
Waffle House.
There is Waffle House. That's true. But Waffle House, you could get shot in Waffle House, and
That's where I prefer.
yeah, and so I said, we're talking about it as amends. I said, you have to do this. It became aware why this guy asked me to be a sponsor. I said, you have to do this, and he said, "I know I have to do this," and. So, some time, we did some other amends and stuff, and I said, just kept on him, kept on him. He said, "I'm going to do it this weekend. I don't know how or when I'm going to do it, but I'm going to reach out." And so this guy, Mike, he calls his dad, and he hasn't talked to his dad in 5 or 7 years. And his dad answers the phone, "Hello?" Like it's the Amazon man. His dad had deleted his phone number. Right? He didn't recognize the phone number is the point. And and his dad says, and Mike says, "It's me, Dad." And he says, "Well, what do you want?" And Mike said he just kept praying and praying and praying, for God to guide him. And he said, "Dad, I need to come talk to you." And his dad says, "Well, when do you want to do that?" And he said, "What for?" And he said, "I just need to talk to you. I don't want to do anything. I just need to sit with you." And he goes, "When do you want to do that?" And he says, "How about today?" And his dad said, "Come over." And so he hung up the phone, and he's driving over there, and he's shaking, out of his boots. And I'll just tell you that his dad had wronged him greater than the son had wronged him, but he was willing to own his mistake. And to me, that's the definition of forgiveness, is when you can. That's the full circle of it, right? When you can set aside the wrongs done by you and own your part and be merciful, that's the full circle. And he got to his dad's house, And his dad opened the door and kind of turned his back on him and just started walking in. And so he walked in and he sat down on the couch. And he made his amends. And they started fighting, like at the Denny's. You know, not physically yet. The Denny's was physical. But this was just kind of, you know, his dad, you know, wanted to get, and he kept saying, Dad, I don't want to fight with you. I just want to tell you, you know, what I did was wrong. Whatever you did, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I just, you know, I want you to know that I knew I was wrong, you know, and I want to make it right. They kept fighting and stuff, and he kept, you know how it goes. And the dad said, well, where do you want to go from here? And he kind of acknowledged it. He said, well, where do you want to go from here? He said, I don't know, Dad. He said, Mike had just had a baby a year ago. And he said, would you like to see a picture of your grandson? His dad said, I didn't even know I had one. And he shows him the picture. And he knew he had a granddaughter that was 5, but he had never seen the granddaughter. He said, I didn't know I had a grandson. And it broke his dad open. They started weeping together. And so they had this incredible moment together, and his dad owned his stuff. And then he's getting ready to leave. And he was there 4.5 hours. He left his phone in the car, and his wife had called him, he said, 67 times. And he's at the door, and he said, again, where do we go from here? And he said, what are you doing tonight? And he said, nothing. He said, why don't you come over and meet your grandson and your granddaughter? And the dad got there and rang the doorbell and took a couple steps back, and Mike and his 5-year-old showed up at the door. And the dad just started bawling. He turned his back and he started walking away, you know, because he was saying out loud, he said, Mike, I just can't handle this. I just can't handle this. And stood about 15 feet from him with his back turned. And the little 5-year-old says, Dad, what do we do? What should I do? He said, why don't you go get your grandfather and ask him to come inside? And she walked down there and grabbed his hand and she said, Grandpa, come on inside. You know, and that day, this guy got his grandkids back. You know, he got his dad back. This guy got his dad back. And then his dad said, they spent this incredible night together, because like a lot of the resentment with the dad was about the new Mike's wife, and they reconciled. You know, she got a father-in-law that night. They all cried and they all wept together and hugged each other. And again, the dad was leaving. He said, well, where do we go from here? This was about 3 weeks ago. And he said, well, next weekend is Maverick's 1-year birthday. Why don't you come? And he said, well, your brother's going to be there, and we haven't talked in 10 or 15 years. He said, that's your all's business. I'm inviting you to come. And the dad ended up reaching out to the son and reconciling. And a week later, they all had dinner together, all 5 of them. And it's all because of the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Like exactly what that page says. Cling to the thought that your dark past is the greatest possession you have. With it, you can help others. What does the rest of it say? With it, you can help you can help them avert death and misery. You know, and that's it finally became full circle for me, right? Like I had finally used my greatest sin, if you will, to the benefit of somebody else. And I'd shared that 1,000 places, you know, but it finally became material, you know, and the God of my understanding wants us to be at peace with each other, right? He and not because he favors me or favors any of us individually, right? Like, you know, God uses us to help each other find him, right? God speaks to us in 90 degrees, you know, and so God wants us to be free of this stuff. And I beg of you, I've never seen an amends that was unable to be made. Or at least that peace was not, let me rephrase that peace, because obviously when people are, you know, but I've never seen amends where peace was not able to be had over some time, you know, and it took me a 25-year circle to find that peace, you know, but that's what we're called to do in here, is to remain seekers, you know, and I hogged up a lot of time. I know there's
I love it. Made it easy.
I know there's a lot you want to add, so I'm going to turn it back over to Amy, and then
Good job.
if the mic is back there, if there's any questions, throw your hand up, and the person with the mic will find you.
Good job. Okay, all right. Hello. Hey, good job, John. Thank you. That's why I love that, because these stories. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're storytellers. We have this book as a guide, but your personal experience is the depth and weight that somebody needs to hear, and there's somebody that always can kind of line up with that. And I'm a literature AA. I'm a doer. I'm a 3 legacy, but they handed me this book and they said, in here you will find a solution for all the problems you have. Right? This book is going to open it's a pathway, right? It's a treasure map to this miraculous and remarkable life. So that seemed important. So I got a highlighter and a pen, and I write in margins, and I go to a lot of big book studies. I participate in a lot of that because I don't know what to do, and Harold talked about, right, that everybody had the answers to the quiz, right? And so in 2010, somebody said, here's the answers to all the quizzes. And so I got in that book, but the 9 step, they talk about so many things, and but primarily it's about this willingness, right? And then the prayer for the willingness. So like John was talking about, some of the amends, I rush to make amends to my children. I want to be right with my kids, man. Who doesn't want to be right with their kids? John wanted to do the financial because then his credit score will go up and he can have things in life that he wants. Who doesn't want to do that? But those more difficult ones, right? And so that's where I pray for that, for the courage and the willingness to do that. And I think what gets between me and the amends that I need to make are, I love the way Harold breaks down delusion, the delusional thinking that we suffer. It's not a big deal. It won't matter anyway. And my friend Tim Highland says, can't we just call it good? Right. I'm sober now. Let's just forget all that. Leave the past in the past, right? But the truth is there's a fear thing, and there's a pride thing, and there's an ego thing, right? So, and it's hard to put aside what they didn't. We were asked to do that in our 4th step. Put aside their part entirely. Entirely? See, I lived my life doing things and blaming you for it. You were the reason I acted that way, and you were the reason I did it. So the blame game was big with me. And so every behavior, I used to harm people, but I had this really kind of horrible thing where I justified anger. When we get to that part, like in the 12 and 12, it goes into that, but that's what I packed around with me all the time. And I could rationalize, minimize, and justify anything I did to you, and probably you had it coming. Because I am, one of my character defects is wrath and rage when we talk about the 7 deadlies. And I would harm people, and I'd say they had it coming, and you had it coming. And so I would harm you, I'd do that because you had it coming. Now, if I've got to go make amends for my part, that means I got to let you off the hook for your part. I don't want to let you off the hook. Because, see, I drink on that, and I hurt you on that, and I carry that, and it elevates me, right? My ego likes to say, yeah, but this guy, he's a real jerk. I mean, I'm not great, but this guy, right? Because I need to do that. I need to feel better. And the humbling process of a 9th step where I have to let you off the hook. I have to say it didn't matter what you did. And I want to talk a little bit about that in sobriety. Here's the deal. If you're new in sobriety, for me, that first, 4th, and 5th step, I could kind of see what you guys were talking about. Right? It's starting to open my eyes, but it's through practice and taking other women through the steps and staying sober and repeating the steps and taking women through the steps and things are coming up that this develops. So in that first year, that first attempt at a 9 step and a 4 step and a 6 step, my sponsor says I'm surfacey. Right? And because I don't like deep waters. I don't want to talk about real stuff. I like to keep it light. Let's stay up here on the surface where I can justify, minimize, and blame you. But as you stay sober, and I love that part of our book, when we get after the 9th step, we start moving into 10 and 11, and we're promised that we are going to grow in effectiveness and understanding. So my ideas about amends, my ideas about justified anger, my ideas about my part and your part, they've shifted and changed over the years. So there's things that I wasn't willing to make amends, or like John said, I don't even owe an amends. I'm not even mad. What are you talking about? But I stick around, then I realize I'm really pissed off. Like, I make decisions based on this thing that I didn't even know I was packing around with me. You know? And so we've got to get to these places where, and I love one of my favorite things in Alcoholics Anonymous is uncover, discover, discard. Uncover, discover, discard. And I'm constantly in this process of uncover, discover, discard. And I have to kind of stay in that. But I had gotten in a fight, so shocker. I know, it's surprising that I would get in a fight, but I did. And it's not surprising.
Sober?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
All the time. All the time. I was volatile. I was dangerously antisocial when I got here. All my edges were jagged. You know, like, there wasn't nothing sweet or nice. Nobody said, oh, Amy, she's so nice. Nobody said that. It was more like, oh, God, here she comes. What's she going to do? And only the bravest of the brave old timers would go, come here, you can sit here. You know, thank God for them. They weren't scared of me. I didn't scare them a bit. They were like, they would just laugh. I'd tell them something and say, that's funny. Like, why are you laughing, old man? Yeah. It's not funny. It's my life. Oh. But I got in a fight with my husband. We weren't married at the time. It was my boyfriend. And we got in a fight because I'm volatile, and I'm newly sober, and I love, there's a story in the back that says that I laughed when I should have cried, and you know, new sobriety is just tough, and my emotions were everywhere, and the noise is so loud because, see, I muted that for so long, and you just took the only solution I ever had away, and I'm trying to learn this new solution, but in the middle of that, I'm in pain. And I'm discombobulated, and the noise is loud. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying this thing, and I'm stumbling forward, and I'm volatile, and I'm explosive. I have a very explosive rage and a wrath and a thing in me. I'm trigger happy. And me and him get in a big fight, and so I go get all dolled up. I was younger and thought I was cute. And I got all dolled up, and I put on some perfume and some tight jeans. And I walked past him out the door, you know, to arouse suspicion or jealousy. Because that's what I like to do. And he says, where are you going? I
Don't
said,
forget bitterness.
Bitterness.
Yeah.
Bitterness, too. And I storm out past him with my perfume trailing in the room, you know. He says, where are you going? I said, to a meeting, you know. Because you can't be mad if I'm going to a meeting. You can't stop me, right? Because I'm going to meetings. And I don't go to meetings. I go see my sponsor. And I'm telling her about, you know, and he said, and I said, and then he said, and why would he say that? And I'm talking all about what he's doing and what he did. And my sponsor goes, hey, I don't sponsor him. I don't care what he did. I need to know what you did. And I was like, well, I'm trying to tell you. He did da-da-da-da. So I did. And she's like, no. I don't want to hear what he did at all. So I want you to tell me the story like you were the only one in the room. You're the only one home. And tell me what you did. So I'll look like an idiot if I tell you that. I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm slamming doors. You know, without him there, the story doesn't, you know, it doesn't play well, you know. How weird. I said, I'll look like a fool. And she goes, Man, the inventory is mine. Leaving out the other person entirely. And see, that's what I got to take into my amends. But I got to do that. And I tell my girls all the time, it's never about you and them. It's always about you and him. So this relationship I'm seeking with God. I want to be right with him. I want to be right with my creator. Him, her, spirit, universe, source, Mother Earth. Whatever that is, whatever that energy is, whatever that thing, that power that's bigger than you. That's the truth. And it's in that truth I have to stand. Like I'm the only one there. How do I treat you? How do I behave? How do I act if you're not there? It's just me. What if you are there? Do I still stand in that truth? Or can you move me out of my truth? Can you get that response or that reaction? Am I blocking my own blessings because I can't remove you from the room. I can't do what I'm supposed to do regardless of what's going on around me. Or somebody else, man, what an order. And I'll tell you, some days I can do it, and some days I won't. I'm like a toddler with my arms crossed, and I stomp my feet, and I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm not going to make amends with my sister. She's dating my ex-husband. We'll get into that tomorrow. Stick around. Me and Harold already warned you, the branches, you know, of the family tree. You gotta work on this. But I got this justified anger. I got these things I want to hang on to. I want to be right. I want to be right. I remember when I was newly sober, my dad said, Amy, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I thought, what a ridiculous question, old man. Being right makes me happy. Both. I want to be right and happy. He said, you can't be both. I was like, what? This nursery rhyme crap they do in Alcoholics Anonymous. The math don't math, and the words don't make sense, and you know. But I believed in what you were doing, and I saw, like Carol said, I watched with my eyes, and you guys were doing okay, and I wanted what you had, so I was willing to do the things like go make the amends I don't want to make. You know, I told you about that volatile and insane behavior I had. My dad said, you know, when you feel that, you know, would you act that way if I was standing there or your sponsor was standing? Because, you know, we're on our best behaviors when our sponsors are around. I didn't flirt with no boys in front of my sponsor. I didn't get him run to the coffee pot 17 times. My sponsor was there, you know. How do you behave if your sponsor was there or if your mother was there or whoever you might, you know, that you would be embarrassed to behave that way in front of. Act like they're sitting there. Act like they're there, and that's how you're going to act. And unfortunately, I don't care who's there. When I wall out, I just embarrass myself and everybody else. But I cussed out my boss. I lost a lot of jobs. I'm right, and when I'm right, and I don't know if you've seen right, I point my finger and I furrow my brow, and I get in real close, and I raise my voice. That's how you know I'm right. God, that's my right look. You stupid, ooh, I'm right. You know, and I do that. And I would do that to boss. Here's the thing. I was self-employed in the entertainment industry. I was a prostitute. And then I got sober and I got a job, like somebody hired me, and I had this real legitimate, like, tax-paying job. That's important. And I was so grateful to get the job. But then, you know, the ego, the body heals, the liar returns. The ego's always looking to try, it's a resilient thing. And the ego creeps back up, and about, you know, a year into this job, I was so grateful for this opportunity and how kind it was and how hard I was going to work for them. I was going to be honest, and I was going to work hard. I was going to do all those things that Harold said. But I get to looking around, and I start thinking, they're not treating me right. They don't appreciate me here. I deserve better. So I cussed them all out. And I quit the job because, you know, you got to let them know. You got to let them know. And I got to my car and I thought, well, that was dumb. That was my only reference. Like, I can't even get another job. But we don't think I'm volatile. And I remember, first I called my husband. I was like, I just quit my job. And he's like, oh, can you go back in? And you smooth it out. That was not, you know, and I was like, I'm not going back in there. I hate them, you know. And my feet are trained, so I drove to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting because my feet are trained, and I show up to you. I show up, I run back to you, I run back to you, I run back to you. And I raised my hand. I said, hypothetically, you know, if say somebody were to cuss their boss and quit their job, you know, what do sober people do then? That was always my question. What do sober people do, you know, when this happens or that happens? Because I don't know, and I'm trying to be one of you. And I got some feedback. They said, well, honey, sober people, they line up another job first, and then they give a thing called a 2-week notice. I said, that's interesting. Write that down. I'm going to use that for next time. And I'm calling my sponsor, and she's like, well, you got plenty of time. We're going to go to 2-day meetings and a night meeting because you're not working. What are you going to do? You're going to show up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we leave. I meet her at the meeting. A few days later, I meet her at the morning meeting. We're leaving. She says, what are you doing today? I said, man, I got nothing planned. She goes, you're going to go back and make an amends to those people. I said, To the job? Yeah, you're gonna go make amends to the job. You cussed them out. You left them short-staffed. You freaked out. You had a few days to calm down. We've been to some meetings. Go make your amends. And I didn't argue with her, but in my head I'm thinking, no, I'm not. So my daddy was sober. And my daddy was sober for like 22 years by then, and I considered him the authority on Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sponsor only had a few years, so I wanted to double-check this process with somebody more sober, I wanted a second opinion on this deal. So I call my dad. I'm like, Dad, Rhonda said I got to go make amends. I don't want to make amends. Those people did I tell you how they treated me? Did I give you why they had it coming? The justification of my actions and my behaviors. And my daddy loved me. I'm a daddy's girl. He said, baby girl, I wish I could tell you didn't have to. And if anybody would tell you that, it would be me. Because I love you and I know it's hard. But your sponsor's right and you got to go make that amends. Oh. But I go and they called security when and the administrator locked his door. I scare people. I'm scary. I'm scary. I know that guy, I don't think he believed I was there to make amends. But I did it. I did it. And I got 1,000 of those stories because I stumbled forward in this deal. And like I said, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. I came in here and I just bumped my head a lot. I bumped my head and I skinned my knees. I hurt people I didn't mean to hurt in sobriety. I was still emotionally driven. I was short-circuiting up here. I was driven by fears that I didn't know I had. It took me a long time to kind of straighten out. 3 years sober, I kicked in my neighbor's door. I threatened to kill everybody in the house. I meant it. Yeah. I know this amends process. 10 years sober, I got physically violent with a woman that I love, a sponsee who trusted me and I trusted her, and we had a wonderful relationship. And I raged out. And I picked her up and I pushed her against a wall. And I was getting ready to fast walk her out into the front yard, dog walk her, because I'm violent. 10 years sober. I'm capable of these kind of actions and behaviors. I have to make amends for that. But I want to tell you what happened. When I was new sober and I had to make amends, I was doing it because my sponsor said I had to, and I'm trying not to drink. For me, drink is to die. And man, you guys make this hard, but okay. I'm not a willing participant. I'm just following directions because I have this gift of desperation, and I believe that if I don't do what you say, I'm going to die. So I'm doing what you say because you said to do it, but it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't seem right to me, but okay. But at 10 years sober, when I'm making those amends, nobody had to tell me to do that.
Right.
Nobody had to tell me I owed an amends. And that God conscience, I couldn't justify it. I couldn't make an excuse for it. I couldn't minimize it, justify it, or make it go away. I was just dead wrong. And I didn't even think about her part. I only thought about what I was doing. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me and them. It's between me and him. And I was convicted. I knew that I was wrong. So the amends get easier. So if you're new and the amends don't make sense, and why do I got to do it, and I don't want to do it, and if you're like me, and you're resistant to the charge, do it. I think Harold said last night, following directions that I don't understand. Doing things that don't make sense. That's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I promise you, behind it, there's this magic. There's this thing that happens, and we get to bear witness to it, one to another, and in each other's lives. So the amends process, like I said, not my favorite thing. I'm better at it. I'm quicker to do it. I still don't like to do it with my husband. I like him to sit and think about what he's done for a little while before I make the amends.
Considerate of you.
I want him to, get his amends ready too, so that we can come together and share an amends process. I want to get there before him. So sometimes I'll wait, hold it back a few days, but but I'm better. I always say, you know, we don't get perfect in this deal. I'm not nice, but I'm nicer. And you guys taught me how to do that. So I think that was it. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Or
Grab us after.
you can grab us afterwards. Yeah. We'll be around. All right. Are we done? Good job. Let's go.